Welcome to our very first interview podcast with Michael and Marilyn on our MPowered podcast. And I'm so excited because we don't have to just talk about ourselves anymore. We can talk about other people.
Exactly.
So when you and I, we first started talking about this a couple of weeks, well, planning the shows out, when we knew it was going to be a go. And so you and I, we were talking and just kind of came out of the blue about
I said, we need Steffi,
Yes.
which was formerly Stephanie, but I met her at the age of 14, so I call her Steffi.
Because we were talking about
Yes,
kids and like
kids.
children and like how, my niece, when she was, 3 or 4 years old, she knew how to do an iPad before. Like, no instructions, just knew. Like, how does that happen? Like, they're already hardwired. And so that was going to be, we just decided, like, hey, this is going to be our first. And it happened within, like, just a couple of minutes. We talked
Yes.
about it. You said X. Let me call Stephanie, see what's going on. And then you said,
We need her mom to be here too, because
Well, we're on
she is the pioneer in all of this.
and then you called, and
And they said, oh, great. We're doing a meeting about that in the morning, on Friday morning. So sure, we'll just come right over and record with you and continue the conversation. So how fabulous is that? It manifested
It was
beautifully.
perfect.
Just was meant to be. So
I can't wait to dive in. So, Marilyn, I'm going to let you introduce, and we're going to take
Yes.
it from there. And we're just going to have a really great conversation about what it's like to be a conscious child in the world today, and what it's like to be the mother of a conscious child and raising.
Am I still a child?
Yeah, like everybody just
I
being
am.
all woke and stuff, right?
I'm 21
Yes.
now.
yes, and I did mention that in our other segment.
I love it.
However, you have learned a lot. You are very evolved consciously for a 21-year-old. And I'm so excited that you are working with teenagers and 20-somethings to help them figure out, and as you navigate through it yourself also, how you can work together
Yeah.
to figure out how to use this energy stuff that you already feel, that you already know
Yeah.
in our world. And then, but it's important because you wouldn't be so evolved if you didn't have the support of your mom.
Always. It's a tag team. That's what we always
Yes.
say. Is like I wouldn't be exactly where I am without her being able to support me. And yeah.
So
it
this
always
is
works out.
Stephanie Elsperman and Jackie Elsperman are our guests today. And we're thrilled to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. So actually, let's start with Jackie.
Yes.
So how did you first realize that Steffi or your children had these energy gifts, or that they were feeling things that were not obvious to a lot of other people?
Well, I would have to say that there was a long period of time where we were unconscious to a lot of it. And it was a very challenging time for our family. And our energies were all mixed in together. And we didn't have a lot of boundaries. We had very, very porous boundaries. And we were all fixing each other. And so, therefore, it wasn't until I started to take my own energy and understand what that meant, my own energy into account, and really focusing on myself, that I started to understand how sensitive the kids were and what that looked like, and that I grew up being sensitive and I had no idea what that meant.
Exactly. That's what we were just talking about. We grew up sensitive and didn't know, and we weren't supposed to know yet. And so when you talked about that, most families were unconscious at that time period too.
Right. And so then you have a lot of anxiety, depression, addictions. I grew up with a lot of that stuff. And so then noticing that the kids were expressing those things, and that they had some of those oversensitivities, and the fight or flight would get turned on really easily. And we lived in basically the entire family lived in a fight or flight environment.
I was always worried.
always worried.
Always
because
worried about everything.
What were you worried about?
I was worried about random things. I was a perfectionist, even from like preschool. And my favorite book was Wemberley Worries. Yeah.
They wrote a book about worrying.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, to help us
Great.
kids. That was before all the Hay House books. But I was worried about random things like getting to school on time. Everything sensory. So like all of my clothes had to feel a certain way. Yes. I was really sensitive to that. Very type A.
We were just
from a
talking
young
about
age.
this morning about her. One of the biggest struggles was getting to church, and Stefanie didn't want to wear shoes. She didn't want anything on her feet.
I still
And
don't.
we would battle and make her put shoes on instead of allowing her not to wear shoes, because that was difficult for her. Why couldn't she go to church without shoes on? I mean, honestly.
Because it wasn't okay in
It
those
wasn't
days.
okay.
Do you know why you didn't want to wear shoes?
Honestly, I mean, I've always loved to be barefoot. They called me Mowgli as a child. Like, I would be a jungle girl if I could. I think it was how they felt. Again, it was like they were too tight, or honestly, looking back now, it's probably because I wanted to be more grounded.
I was just getting ready to say that.
Yeah, I was like, you led me there
Yes.
with that look.
I just read an article about grounding. Like,
Well,
how
yeah. I
important
mean,
that
it
is.
makes total sense that why I wanted to just be like connected with nature, touch my food, like all of that. I just kind of wanted to be immersed in it and feel more grounded probably than I felt at the time.
So things
Yeah,
that she was
that
innately
makes
doing,
sense.
she was told were not okay by us because that didn't look normal, and so
Right. Shutting down intuition.
shutting
from
down
a young age,
intuition
yeah.
and saying that, what you're feeling is not normal or is not
Or your coping skills aren't okay because they're not
right.
in
They're
the
too
world.
big or too, and we were also energetically sensitive that Stefanie was very loud and very expressive and very big energy, and we would want her to tone it down, tone it down, put it in a box.
Do you know why you wanted her to do that?
Because it felt overwhelming energetically
mom?
to me as a mom. I felt like it was just a lot of energy for me, and I was always like I need a lot of alone time. I need a lot of space to clear and to not feel like I had to take that on. But I grew up in a very emotionally sensitive. Everybody had hurt feelings all the time, so I didn't know why everyone's feelings were hurt. I thought that was my fault. And so it was learning that it wasn't my fault and that
Yay.
everybody could be their own person. And my mom had her own stuff. My dad had his own stuff. I have my stuff. My husband had his stuff. We're all allowed to feel the way we're allowed to feel. But Stefanie, I would think it just felt very overwhelming to me, her big energy.
And it didn't feel right to let her eat all of her food with her fingers.
No.
We were also looking at looking like a perfect family.
Right.
There are all those things that tell you have to look a certain way to be successful, or you have to act a certain way to be successful, or to fit societal norms. And I think we didn't realize that there were other options, or you didn't always have to look perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was part of the times. It was
For
part of the
sure.
times.
Yeah.
Definitely part of the times. It's a different time now as they're learning how to, they know their energy already. They get the energy piece, whereas they're trying to incorporate it into the regular world. Whereas our generation understands the regular world but is waking up energetically, and so we're trying to bring in the energy piece.
And they already have it.
Sorry?
And they already have it.
And they already have it. And they just they put the two pieces together, and then all they need is just the connector cable to put it together, and off they go. And they're manifesting like crazy, left and right. They're dreaming their worlds into being. And it's easy for them once they understand what the rules are.
Right.
Or there are no rules, but
So for these other moms who don't know this yet, there's also this in-between space because, it wasn't automatically letting them tap into their own consciousness when they were born because you were still following society rules. How did it feel to help them go through that transition of, okay, now that we've taught you the society rules, guess what? I want you to tap back into your own intuition.
It was scary as anything, and they got mad. They got really. There was a lot of. It's like taking the security blanket away.
Right.
I think a big part of it was going from trying to fix all of our feelings or make us feel better all the time, and going towards like allowing us to make our own decisions. And that's how I got back in touch with my intuition, was figuring out what I wanted to do, not what I should be doing, or living up to people's expectations. And obviously, yeah, that was scary because that led me down different paths where I had to learn my lessons in a really big way, and sometimes into like deeper, darker things, but ultimately like having the support to come back through, and like that's how my intuition has gotten stronger. Does that make sense? A little bit?
Yes.
What time frame was that? Like that you
So-
started, sensing, facing that, and
Yeah.
then hitting some of those darker times, right?
Yeah.
Like what time frame was that, and what was that like?
So the time frame was probably from when I started seeing you. No, before that. Like around when I was like 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
And the big thing was I got concussions, and I know that started my mom on getting interested in a lot of like healing and energy. But I got a couple concussions playing volleyball, and then I ended up dealing with like a lot of anxiety and depression afterwards. Not diagnosed, but just like differences that I could definitely tell. And things progressively got worse, and I developed an eating disorder at 14, right when I started high school, my freshman year. And then started modeling throughout high school and thought it was like everything that I wanted. I was living my dream and all of this, but ultimately it was really not a good place for me mentally, emotionally, physically, and all that. And I honestly got to a point where I was suffering so much that by the age of 16, I was like, if this is what my life is going to be like until I'm 40, I was like, I can't do that. I can't do this anymore. And so my big epiphany waking up was I was literally like on my bathroom floor crying, not knowing why, just being in such pain, and a voice greater than myself just said, no, there has to be something better. And if my mom would have saved me from all of that pain and said, no, you're not going to do this, like, I mean, obviously there's a piece where you have to make sure that your child is safe and okay, but if she wouldn't have let me go down that path, then I would not have had the big spiritual awakening that I had at 16 and a half-ish. Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, what?
We talked about that in the last episode, how sometimes those things that feel so awful in the
Yeah.
moment are really offering you a gift to open up and really
Truly.
find who you are. But in that moment, it's hard to feel grateful for that.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I wouldn't trade those experiences for the world, because honestly, that was when I started making decisions for myself and what felt good to me, and not according to what I thought would please other people.
Right.
And that was huge.
Yes.
Yeah. And to have someone support you through all of it is amazing.
How
Yeah.
was that going through that for you, Jackie?
Well, it's if you look at it from a human perspective, it's difficult to watch your child struggle. And I could have looked at it and, like Stefanie said, try and save her from it, because it was too much for me to bear to watch her have pain. But I knew that in order for her to get to that next level, that she would have to be able to walk through the pain and know and surrender to God, to Spirit, and allow that to happen. And you can only do that when you get to a point where you're reaching for not me, not her father, not anybody else, but you reach for Spirit. And when you make that connection, there's no turning back. Your life becomes a miracle.
Yes.
And it's amazing. And I wanted that so much for my children. And it's not for me. I want that for everyone. And we all want that for everyone. It's not for us to decide when someone has that experience. You have to allow that to happen.
Exactly.
Whenever it happens.
Although it's terrifying.
Beautiful.
It can be.
It can be terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that, old programs don't come back up and bring some of that back into your life, and then you question whether or not it's really gone, but you trust and you know that it's just another piece, it's just another moving towards the light. It's another piece that they need in order to let go of the old programming.
Mm-hmm. It's just incredible to do that at such a young age.
Well, that's what I'm seeing is just that age, starting high school at 14, is such a pivotal time because that is where your bubble, first of all, is super small because you think that your world just exists inside of like the walls of your high school and at home. And it's like you don't really have an idea that there is so much bigger, so much more outside of just your small bubble. And then you have all of your friends and society and parents like putting these expectations on you, and you don't realize the freedom that you have to be unique or to listen to yourself. You're just like trying to deal with all of it in the best way possible. Yeah. So I see that there's such a need for support at that age.
Well, and in this day and age, the kids go from one activity to another, and they can't even feel themselves anymore. They're just operating under what's the next thing? Well, I'm great at soccer, so now I need a soccer,
Well, I noticed I was doing a lot of things because I could do them and not because I wanted to.
Right. So you just automatically fall into doing the next thing, and then they shut off all of their, what is it that I like to do? I'm just doing this because all my friends are doing it.
Like
my parents
part.
think it's good for me, and I'm good at it, so I should do it. So I should go, and if I want to be better and if I want to be a success, I have to keep overriding the system. So they're overriding the guidance system and not listening to stop, slow down.
Okay, when you say guidance system, what do you mean? Like their guidance system?
Their own intuition.
Talk more about that.
Listening to their gut feelings. So Stefanie is, she's a physical empath, and she feels everyone's feelings. And so she grew up with stomach aches since the time she was teeny tiny little. She would feel everyone's stuff and put it all in her stomach, or, or feel things and then not.
I was always nervous.
She's always nervous, and didn't learn, when a kid has a stomach ache, you give them something to make it go away instead of figuring out why.
Right. Like we went to so many doctors, and I think one doctor told me I should go see a psychologist, and it wasn't until years later that I actually went. And yeah.
Was it the psychologist? Did the psychologist, was it beneficial to you?
So I started seeing a psychologist, Aaron Shannon.
Yeah, who does energy work.
Yeah, who does energy work, but I'm trying to remember the age. Probably, it was before, no, it was after I saw you. So it was about like 14.
Yeah.
Like
I think
15.
I referred you
You
to her.
Yes, you
You're
did.
like, she's doing, she's too much, like go see Aaron. And she truly, like, I credit her to saving some of my life, to be honest, because she was incredibly beneficial because she understood the energy piece, and she was she is so smart, and she just gets it, kind of. And obviously for a while, I'm sure there was a disconnect because she knew that I was struggling, especially during my eating disorder, and I wasn't willing to admit it or to be real with myself. But ultimately, like, I think everyone needs someone else to talk to that's not their parents or their friends, for sure.
Yeah.
So is the eating disorder, it's in the past, right?
It's in the past. I think it's something that, like, I don't want to say I'll always deal with it. I think it's something I would never go back to in its severity as it was, because it just doesn't make sense to me anymore. I think that, like, there are beliefs that do come up on a daily basis, especially with social media and everything, but it's been my greatest teacher in learning how to love myself through anything, and to accept my body and to feel grounded in who I was. Because ultimately the eating disorder was me not wanting to be in this body anymore, kind of, from a spiritual level. And so I've really had to accept being in this body and being grounded onto this planet and knowing that my purpose is here and it's not anywhere else.
So this is really, a lot of people have this.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, for sure.
I even had touches of when I was 16-ish,
Yeah,
sort of
it's
in that
it's that
spot,
age, yeah.
right? So like wanting to fit in, like all of that, it's actually control. Like for me, it was
Right.
I could control something that everything was out of control. So what was it for you? Like, so say somebody's listening to this and they don't have the spiritual connect yet, but they definitely have like the eating disorder. They're aware of that. They may not tell anybody, but they're living with it.
Yeah.
Like, what would you share with that girl that's listening to this, or that guy that's listening to this, that's in high school, that doesn't have that connector piece? to the spiritual side of things or
Right.
the lesson side of things. So it's one thing to talk about, and I got the lesson of it,
Yeah.
but like, what would you share with that person that doesn't know what the next step is?
I think, first of all, I never realized how much better life could be once I decided that I wanted to get healthy, and not only physically healthy, but mentally healthy. Because that's the biggest piece, is you can look a certain way and you can look like you're struggling with an eating disorder or not. Like, you can look any way, but it's the mental piece that is so hard. And you don't realize how much energy and time it consumes, and how many relationships are hurt by that energy and time consumed in your mind thinking about food or habits or whatever. And just know that it gets better, especially when you ask other people for help and are truly honest with yourself. Because for the longest time, I ignored it or thought I could manage it because I wanted to keep modeling, to keep my status, to look a certain way. And I wanted to maintain all of that. And I knew that getting help or going through recovery or just honestly being real with myself meant that I would probably have to strip all of the labels that I once had and that I once defined myself as. And that was scary, because that meant I was like, I don't know who I am without this.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
the piece I want to add to that is Stefanie could handle anything. She grew up, some of her first words were, I do it. I do it. So you're talking about the control, and it's that not surrendering, not allowing yourself to surrender. What am I surrendering to? And how do I do that? If I'm always able to control and I always make things happen and I can be who I can get whatever I want and I can make things happen. I can be a model. I can be a top athlete. I can be a successful student. I can control all those things. But if I let go of those things, who am I? Like Stefanie was saying, it's that surrender. What are you surrendering to?
I just didn't know my purpose in the world. So again, like, I was basing my reality off of other people's expectations. Like, I had people telling me like, oh, I was meant to model. Oh no, I was meant to play volleyball. I mean, this was just in high school. And so I was like, well, okay, is that my purpose in the world? Truly, it didn't make me feel good internally, but I didn't know my passions. My mom asked me like, is there one thing that like brings you joy or like purpose or passion? I remember her asking me this in the car in high school, and I was like, I was so lost. I had no idea how to answer that.
So don't you think, though, that almost all high school students would not know how to answer that question authentically? I mean, you really jumped into that early and tapped into that energy of who you are. 'Cause I don't know that there's too many high school students who even know what their purpose is, or they might be
I know
coming
there's
there.
people that are in their 50s that don't know.
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly what I was going to
Exactly.
say, is that I came to the question, what do I like? And being a mom of...
And then you asked me.
I had thrown myself into everything about them, and I was numb to my own
Yes.
life. And so I didn't know what that meant. And so I sat and I journaled, and my pen didn't go anywhere. And I just said, make it go, just write something. Figure out, this pen feels good in my hand. I mean, I couldn't feel. And so if I couldn't feel... and once I started to understand what joy was or what things brought me joy, I wanted my kids to be able to associate feeling good. And what does that mean exactly?
Yeah.
Yes.
And where does that live in your body? I feel good.
You had to take care of yourself first before
Right.
you could open up space for them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've heard you say that like 3 times.
And that was my experience too.
And I think
Same
that's what
thing.
most parents
Yes.
don't ever do. Like, because
Yeah.
we've had
Yes.
classes before, and I don't have kids, but like that question comes up in classes about, well, how can I be conscious when my kids are screaming at me at 5 o'clock in the
Right.
morning, right? When we start, the
I can
first
tell
thing you do
you,
is meditate in the morning. And you're like, how's that going to happen?
Kids in the bed.
feel, but like, I'm like, do it anyway. So I can't really speak to that as a parent, but like, what's your take on that? Like, as far as...
So the psychologist told me that the kids don't listen to what you say, they watch what you do.
Yeah.
They watch your energy, they watch how you behave and what you're vibrating. And so if you're saying, but we always tell them they can just do your best, that's all we want. But you're sitting there as a perfect person, perfectly dressed, and you never make a mistake, and you always have an answer, and you can always figure it out. Kids don't know that what does that, I mean, I can't fail because they don't fail. So
Yeah. And I think a huge thing was when I saw you starting to take time for yourself. First of all, I didn't love it because that meant that she wasn't there to fix all my problems because I was very codependent. And I think a lot of empathic kids are very codependent on their moms or a parent. And when she took time for herself, I was like, what are you doing? You're not always available to me anymore. And so I was angry at it for a while, but ultimately in the end, it's taught me that like, that's something that I need. And I know that she needs it, and we respect that for each other. And it's definitely changed our relationship. Yeah, I think it's so important for all parents.
Yeah. So now there's kids older than you. There's women that are our age who still don't feel like they've got a grasp on this. But I think we want to let them know that it's never too late. It's never too late.
Always.
Right. Right. And that there's time for all of us to open up. Right. Because growth is unlimited, but there's time for all of us to, no matter where we are, to move forward and to see our authentic self and demonstrate self-care to our kids, even if our kids are adults.
And what I'd like to add is that there's going to be an adjustment period. And so when you're making new neural pathways, creating a new way of being and choosing a new avenue, it's going to want to pull you back to the old way because that's comfortable. It's comfortable to feel everybody's stuff, to take care of everyone's stuff. But when I'm making this new way for myself, it's going to feel good, but there's going to be that old pull back. And it's to just keep going, feel the old stuff, but keep moving
like
forward
mom
and know that I'm sorry?
I said mom guilt.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it really
Like,
is.
how
It's
dare
I be taking
It's almost
time
like
for
you have to
myself?
put your fingers in your ears and go, no, I'm going anyway. I'm diving and I got to keep going.
Yeah.
So you do, but I think it's a very crucial point to drive home is that if you don't take care of yourself first, if you're not aligned first, you can't be really. We talk about that in general as a public, but it's another thing to relate that to being a mom.
Or a dad.
Or a dad.
Or dad.
You're in a family,
Yeah.
you're
Yes.
emanating energy wherever you are. So if you come home and you're in a bad mood or you wake up in a bad mood, that's being spread throughout the house. And so know that everyone's going to be affected in some way or another, or not, but it's going to be there. And so really try and get yourself in a good place and be clear. And clear your own energy before and set your intention for the day before you engage with everyone else.
That's
Yeah.
how it works. It has to work that way.
Exactly.
That's why they always say put your oxygen mask on first.
Right.
So that's where we start,
before kids
right?
play
Right.
That's where
Yeah.
you encourage everybody to start, whether they're young or they're the adult. Either way, you got to start with self-care.
Yeah. I always knew when something was up with my parents. Like if they were trying to be like, oh, like everything's fine, it's all good. I'd be like, no, wait, what's wrong? Like really, what's wrong? And they would be like, no, nothing. And that just bugged me so much. And so I think like being transparent to an extent
With your feelings.
with your feelings and showing that it's okay to talk about those things and that they don't have to be stuffed under is so important. Yeah, that we've gotten to that place. I mean, it's taken so long to get to that place, but
Everybody just wants to be heard and seen, even within the family, not only in society and outward, but really listening to your kids, even though you may not understand or may not agree. I don't always agree with the way Stefanie sees things because it's her own perspective, but I allow her to voice it, and it is her perspective. So things are the way they are for her, and they're, for me, maybe different, but it's not just because I'm her parent doesn't mean that she should see it my way or she should change how she feels.
Right. I
So-
love that.
tell me like what's going on like now. Like,
So what's going on
how
now?
is this like? I get this. We could talk about this and dive into this for days.
Oh
like,
my
this
gosh,
is so,
we could keep talking.
I'm already thinking about like what we could like the family, how energy affects a family in a house. I never thought about that till you said that. That's really cool. But like for today, like what's going on in your life today? Like what's the thing that you're most excited about?
Well, project-wise.
Yeah.
So I have a group called Soul Circle, which is basically we get together ages around like 13, 14 to I'm 21, so obviously I'm there. And we talk about what it means to be an empath, but also functioning in like the real world with friends and with family and kind of understanding energy and why we might be feeling a certain way. So that's a really fun thing. And then coming soon, I think at the end of September, I'll be starting a group called Get Real, which is a group for young adults age like 21 and up to talk about kind of like real world things where we can talk without a filter and talk about whether that's like relationships, social scenes, all of those things, because we all get energy on some sort of level, and we just want other people to connect with who really understand us. So, yeah, those are two
That's
things.
so fascinating.
There's one
Great.
other thing. There's also another mentorship program that I'm starting with my friend Paige. We are demoing it at Parkway West High School, but basically it's called MPowered. Different spelling, guys. I know.
More than me.
We're in sync. It's EM asterisk powered, basically. And that's kind of like speaking to the whole high school girls demographic, because I know that's both places like where we struggled a lot. As I was saying, I dealt with an eating disorder starting at age 14, and just feeling like there's such a need for more positive role models in life, and not necessarily that's going to be like a spiritually focused thing, but just really learning how to navigate and knowing that your reality is a reflection of yourself, not other people's stuff. So, yeah.
That's great.
It's so exciting. Those are like my little babies that I'm working on this fall. So, yeah.
Yes.
I love it.
That's very important.
Thanks.
Yay.
Jackie, like what's going on with you? Like what are you excited about?
I'm excited about, my passion is really working with clients one-on-one and teaching them how to open up to their intuition. And
So you work with people too.
yes,
Awesome.
yeah. And it's a special place. I'm a Reiki master healer, and Marilyn's actually my Reiki mama. And that led to some other modalities, but it's really teaching women how to open up to the energy, to subtle energy that they feel, and empowering them with something that they already have, and a gift that they already have.
Yes. Yay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Any
this
other
is
questions?
this has been so cool. Having you guys here, thank you for coming here today and
Thanks for
sharing a
having
little
us.
bit. I
Having
know
us.
we
It's
could talk
been an
about
honor.
this for so long. I just think this is really so important to start having these conversations, that this just starts getting out there, because they're not talking about it, and what you focus on expands, and it's just time to focus on things that I consciously want to expand, and this conversation is one of them. So I appreciate your impacting that today and coming down and being our first guest
Thank
on our
you.
Thank
first
you so
interview.
much.
What an
first
honor.
show.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
And I want to say to our listeners, too, if you have any questions about what Jackie and Stephanie were talking about today, or things that didn't make sense, please feel free to reach out to any of us.
Absolutely.
And we would like to continue to address this in our show, Living Consciously.
And everybody find their purpose.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah,
Yeah.
That would be
absolutely.
awesome.
Amen.
Especially at
Thank
a young
you.
age. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Well, Abraham
Any
always says
age.
it's joy.
Oh, yes.
Like the purpose is joy.
Obviously.
And I think sometimes that gets a little collapsed, like my purpose is joy. Yes, it is. But there's also something else there that gives, I believe there's an expression inside of it. So once that is
What does
expressed,
that mean?
that expression results in bringing us joy. So
Agreed.
it doesn't matter how you get there as long as you get there, right?
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.